Hey, welcome to Growing a Fruitful Brand, where we discuss how to create and grow a brand that makes the world a better place for you, your customers, and your employees. I'm Ben Lueders, founder and art director of Fruitful Design and Strategy, and my guest today is Brett Hicks, an expert in employee experience and company culture. She's led training and engagement at places like CNA Industries, Flywheel, WP Engine, and Mole Halls. Brett is a personal friend of mine and who I turn to whenever I have a question around company culture or people ops. If you want to build a brand that attracts and retains amazing talent, then this conversation is for you. Enjoy. Brett, thanks so much for being on Growing a Fruitful Brand.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm obsessed with podcasts, so this is a joy.
Well, hopefully you'll be obsessed with this podcast when we're done with this episode. We want to talk about employer branding or employment branding. These terms seem to be a little bit synonymous and interchangeable. But how would you define employer branding?
So I know that at Fruitful, you guys talk about branding in part as like traditional branding as being the way that the public views your company. So like your reputation with your customers or your potential customers, the folks that you want to buy from you. And so when I think about employer branding, I think about it as your current customers, quote unquote, but rather your current employees. How did they feel being a part of your company? And then like potential candidates, potential employees, when they think about your brand, they think about your employer brand, what did they feel? What did they think about in terms of what it would be like to work for you and work within your company?
That's a good distinction. So you have basically, that consumer brand that is how your, potential customers see you. And so then there's this like hiring side, the side of like the people who might work for you or do work for you. How do those two intersect? Is there overlap between what, your customers see and what your employees should see and feel?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think about like some of the companies I've worked for, we like want our customers to become employees because they're already brand advocates. They're people who like love our product for one reason or another, have used our services in the past, or are brand ambassadors to the point where they're talking about to their friends about this service or this product that they love. And so we want them to come work for us because they're hopefully theoretically going to do the same thing once they're employees and tell all of their friends what a great place it is to work, as well as, use our services or our products. And so, yeah, I do think that they do overlap. And you'll see, especially right now, just in kind of the era of work that we have, that we're in right now, which is that the employees are like so powerful. They have such a powerful voice right now, even more so than the employers.
As an employer, I totally feel this.
Ben is
it's
nodding.
A good thing.
Yes, exactly. So it's such a powerful time right now to have your brand advocates as customers become your employees. So I think I was going to say that you'll see a lot of companies are really starting to invest in the employer brand side. Like there are companies like, for instance, I have a huge company crush on Airbnb. I was an Airbnb host for 4 years. And
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So I followed along with what Airbnb is doing in terms of, like from the host side, but also from the employer side. And they've been very progressive for a decade longer than a lot of companies have.
I've had a branding crush on Airbnb for a long time because I think their like design and branding and messaging is like unbelievable. So
absolutely. And like you're probably thinking of it from the customer side.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I'm thinking of it from the employee side because if you were to look like Airbnb, for instance, they have an entire webpage designated just exclusively to like attracting talent and talking about their employer brand. This is what you would get if you worked here. And I have just been obsessed. Like if you follow the story of how they served their employees when they had to lay folks off with COVID, like it's unbelievable. I mean, the lengths that they went to, like moving heaven and earth to like really support the folks who they were having to let go. Even just down to something so simple, which is like, hey, you have a company laptop and we're laying you off, but like you get to keep it. And because we want you to have that if you want to go into freelancing. And then they turned around, they used their entire internal talent team and made them now recruiters to helping the folks that they laid off find new jobs.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, wow, they are such a incredible kind of pillar in terms of employer branding in the world. And so companies like that, I think, are just making waves and making it harder for other companies to keep up.
Oh,
right?
I know. Way to set the bar high, Airbnb.
Yeah.
Well, and that's so interesting though, because what if they hadn't done that? What if they hadn't gone that extra mile and really taken care of people as best they could? Like, think of how that could hurt their consumer brand too. You know what I mean? That bad press, that bad publicity. Just like, I'm sure they weren't just doing it for the optics of it, but like, it's interesting how, I think, as someone who goes on, LinkedIn now, what I think about a lot of companies is what I see them posting about their employees, what they're doing. And there's something about like, man, I would rather do business as a customer with an employer who's taking good care of their employees and is a fun place to work, as opposed to one that doesn't really seem to care.
Yes. You're so right about like what you read kind of online about a company is effectively what is going to influence all of our thoughts about them, because that's the only access that we have to them. And I think about, this is probably a year ago now or so, but Bumble, the company, I think it's the dating app.
Yeah, it's a dating app. Yeah.
Like, it's not a company that I would naturally think like, wow, what an incredible employer. But I've been married for, closer to a decade. So I just haven't used those tools personally.
Yeah, those things didn't exist when I was on the market. So.
Like, it was just barely scratching the surface when I got into my marriage. So also not using it. However, what I saw a post from Bumble, their CEO, and like led by a woman, which I think was neat to see in Silicon Valley, but she was promoting some of their kind of unique people first benefits. And one of the things that she shared was that they were providing like leave for families who were going through miscarriage, just the way that you would if you, kind of in a traditional sense, lost a loved one. But families do grieve when they miscarry. And
absolutely.
So like being able to get kind of a bereavement in that setting or in that situation, I thought like that's really powerful. And so these companies, I think, that are coming up with the really creative ways to retain their employees and then putting it out there for the world, I think, are saying like, are you going to step it up too? Like other companies, are you going to, what are you going to do in return? So, I've been amazed, like seeing some of the creative employer branding kind of messages out there, because it's kind of like lighting a fire under other companies, but
right.
you're gonna be people first like you say you are.
Well, actually, let's talk about that, because for a small little company like mine, like, should I be expected to be able to have the same kind of fun company culture with all of the everything that like an Airbnb might have?
No, I don't think so. Things like that take, like the bereavement leaves and stuff like that, that takes funding. It takes kind of wealth, if you will, in more ways than one, not just financially, but also like having a team that's big enough to kind of cover for folks who might be out. But it brought to mind this idea that you can kind of start to build in processes that are smaller scale, but still feel very people first. So for instance, I don't know if you guys probably have heard this phrase or this line that great design is invisible. Coming, obviously fruitful, working with design all the time. But that idea of great design being invisible is this idea that like when something just works, you barely even notice kind of the system or the process that was in place to make it work. So, you know, if I get up in the morning and I go like pour myself a glass of water and I turn on the faucet and it works, I don't think anything of it. I just get my water and I drink it and I go on with my day. But if I like turn on the faucet and it doesn't work, then I'm like, what? You know, I'm like frustrated. I'm mad. Oh, great. My day started off horrible.
We pretty much just notice bad design. Like good design, we just take for granted.
Exactly.
This industry, I swear.
Yes, that is 100% true.
We get no respect.
And I think that's the same thing, like as an employer, is you're probably not always going to get the credit for it. But like when you have these systems and processes in place that just work, then people are happy, but they don't even know why they're happy. And so small companies can do things like that. Like I worked for a company that had just kind of one of those, oh, how did this even happen? Like amazing moments. So anytime somebody did lose a loved one, a team member lost a loved one, then our people team went to work to not even ask them for information regarding to the situation in terms of, okay, where is the service being held? Where is the memorial being held? But they would show up to the memorial and there would always be flowers from us. Or, you know, if a team member got engaged, you know, the next morning they come back to their desk and there's a bottle of champagne waiting for them. So these are these like invisible systems that like actually take a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking. As like a small company, like there's some real personnel that you have to be dedicated. So like how many people did it take to pull that off? Was that just you? Yeah. Were you just superwoman
I would
saving the day?
Some of these, you know, were certainly not just my idea or me at work at these, but I would say that it was kind of like a culture of people first processes. So, you know, from day one, when people go through onboarding, like we're instilling this mindset that like we are people first. So then, you know, fast forward a year, and then maybe you become a manager at the company, then you feel empowered to share, oh, one of my team members just got engaged. I saw it on Instagram. And then it wasn't even like a really intentional formal thing, but they would pass that message along in a quick Slack message to somebody on the people team. Oh, okay, swing right into
like
action.
Secret Slack message, and it's like, okay, this is happening.
Truly, I mean, those things, I don't know. They just like, that's what great design is. It just happens. It's invisible. So yeah, I mean, I definitely was a part of making some of those surprise and delight moments happen. But I think it was a group effort. And I will say, like at the time, I mean, it was a company of probably 50 people. When that was going to be my follow-up
question. Like what size should a company be before they like hire someone like full-time to be like head of people or and really like, you know, keeping their eye on this kind of stuff?
I think that you can have an individual contributor like doing some tasks that are sort of quote unquote people related before you need that kind of higher level leader in terms of like a head of people or a director of HR or something like that. It really depends on the type of company that you are and like what you need most. As you grow, though, obviously you start to add more individual contributors, and then it would be time for a leader probably around like the 50 to 60 person mark.
Sure.
As your people team needs are growing.
As we said, Brett's worked at Flywheel and also at Mole Halls as well. These are two companies here in Omaha that are just known for, I feel like their employment or employer brand is like synonymous with, you know, the brand they put out in the world for their customers. And they're really known for that. Like, I mean, when I think of either of those two companies, I think of, you know, things that I've seen on LinkedIn that their teams are doing and stuff like that. And so you got to be a part of that, a big part of that, I think.
Yeah.
What are can you just share some like stories of like fun stuff that you were able to be a part of at either Flywheel or Mole Halls?
Yeah, I would love that. Thanks for the praise for those companies. hold them both in high regard as well. One of the things I probably am most proud of at Flywheel, I'll start there first, is the manager training that I got to be a part of. So I really credit the CEO, the former CEO at Flywheel, Dusty, with believing that every employee has the right to work for an excellent or an exceptional manager. Because you've always heard that cliche that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that he so believed and like lived this idea that we need to have extraordinary people managers and people leaders if we are going to be successful. And so, because I was in charge of training and development at the time, I felt really privileged that I got to be the one to kind of work closely with him to say like what that looked like for us to level up all of our managers so that we can give our team members extraordinary leadership. And so we just literally called it leadership training. Like didn't have like some great branding. I suppose there was an aspect of it that we called Elevate, but nevertheless,
there you go. That's a little more branded.
Yeah. So Elevate, like as a program, I got to spearhead and build, and basically it had like 3 to 4 different components. So every time an employee became a manager, they went through manager onboarding with me, and then all the folks who were currently managers at the time of launch, they also went through the same onboarding. So beyond the onboarding process, you got enrolled in what we called a cohort. And so literally every single week, and I did this for 2 years, so we're talking at least 100 weeks of an hour with every single people manager.
Wow.
So there were about 40 people managers.
How did you do with the pressure of that? Like,
yeah.
Was there any, us designers, we struggle with imposter syndrome, like all the time, like always just thinking that, our work isn't that great and we're, just kind of devaluing it. Like, did you struggle with that at all? Did you feel like the pressure or weight of like, all these people are going to be managing other people?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yes. 100%.
I think you're great.
Thanks, Ben. No, for sure. Imposter syndrome was a frequent kind of topic within the cohorts, even among like all the managers, myself certainly. In fact, one of my favorites, so I used to train on the concept of radical candor, which is like a feedback framework, plug for that book by Kim Scott. But yeah, one of the things I taught in that class was actually like my own radical candor story when someone gave me feedback that really impressed an important reality on me, which is that like some information that I needed to hear. Basically, I had been leading these cohorts. So we took the 40 managers and we split them into 4 unique cohorts. And I met with them each cohort an hour a week. Okay. And one of the cohorts was our senior leadership team. And so the senior leaders included all of the C-suite, CEO, chief product officer, chief financial officer, chief operating officer. And of course, little old me, I'm like, who am I to come in here and tell you guys how you ought to do things? And so oftentimes in that room specifically, I would find myself like just kind of shrinking in a way, because if somebody took the conversation down a bunny trail that really wasn't what we came to talk about, I wasn't being assertive and stepping up and saying like, let's get back on track. And so a lot of times I would be kind of disappointed with how those conversations would go because I was not keeping us on track. And so I got, but that was because of my imposter syndrome. And I was like, I don't want to be like, nope, let's talk about what I want to talk about. So anyway, I actually got some radical candor from my boss at the time, and who was a part of that cohort. And so he was witnessing this trend. And he said, can I give you some feedback? And I said, yeah. And he was like, it's hard for us to take you seriously in that room because you don't take you seriously.
Wow.
And I was like,
you're gonna take that through the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know?
I've never forgotten it. That was years ago. And I was like, at first, like my ego was definitely hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, oh my gosh, they found me out. They know that I feel awkward in there. And then, but, you know, so that was like the high challenge. But then he had high personal care. And he said, we're all just like, we're waiting for you to take ownership. Like, we have your back. Like, go in there knowing that like we want you to succeed. And so, yeah, bring your A game. And
wow. No pressure.
I know. So I did like that next meeting, that next cohort training. I came in knowing exactly what I wanted to say, being prepared, you know, dotted all my I's, crossed all my T's really, really thoroughly. And then as soon as things like got off track, I pulled us back in. I said, you know, that can wait. Let's get back.
Look at you go.
Put on my assertive pants.
I know. I'm picturing in like a power suit or something like that.
Yeah, the whole like I had to like power pose before I went in the room to feel confident. But no, it was actually so powerful.
It's awesome.
Because like nobody else in the room besides my boss at the time knew that conversation had happened, that feedback conversation had happened. But I actually got a Slack message from my CEO, and he'd said to me, like, hey, Brett, you did an awesome job in our senior leader meeting today. I really appreciated that you kept us on track, and like it felt super valuable today. And I was like, wow, like this is the power of great feedback. Because if I had just gone on operating with my imposter syndrome, feeling like, oh, I can just like fake it till I make it, no one's noticing that I'm shrinking in this room, then I would have just failed. Like I just would have plateaued, and it wouldn't have been valuable, and I would have been wasting a lot of people's time. But I appreciated that my boss had the empathy, honestly, to give me critical feedback so that I grew and improved, although it did hurt my ego, like no lies. That was hard. That was hard to hear, but like it helped me, you know, and it improved my I was more successful because of what he shared with me. And so, I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome. Those settings were intimidating a lot. But what I always tell people who are fearful of, you know, having to go have a hard conversation or becoming a manager, like, who am I? Like, I don't have this experience. I'm like, but you have been managed before, right? So you know what you want from a manager. So now go try all those things that you didn't get to try when you were just being managed. Now that you are the manager and you get to try them yourself. And so, there was a lot of grace in those settings, and we were just very experimental. But that manager training, like kind of program Elevate, that was one of my proudest programs that I got to spearhead, because another component of it was something we called Coaches, and it's a mentor program that I built. And it was just really remarkable to see. The way that it was set up, it was like managers coaching managers, and you applied to get coached on a specific topic. And then my CEO and we would actually pair people based on the application they submitted and say, oh, I want to get better at public speaking or something. Sure. Then we would choose somebody else on the leadership team who is an extraordinary public speaker and say, hey, for a quarter, will you guys meet once a week and just work on this? And I would do a little kickoff call with them where we set a goal and we set milestones so that you can measure your success along the way. And I would say the Coaches program was one of the biggest successes in terms of like actually getting that feedback after the fact to say, like, this made a huge impact on me and my career, you know. And 9 times out of 10, like if you applied for public speaking help, you might become a better public speaker. But I think 90% of the time, at least, the folks who were getting coached were just grateful to have a quarter to just sit with and learn from somebody in the company who they wouldn't otherwise get a chance to just have undivided attention from. So it was really unique to have pairings of like our VP of customer success paired with like a demand gen marketing individual contributor.
That's what, isn't that the collision that they talk about at Google or something like that? Like just different people from different parts of the company who wouldn't usually be working closely together. I see that sometimes even in our small company. It's funny how quickly you can become siloed. And it's like, this is my team, that's your team, these are your people. And then every once in a while, I'll get a one-on-one interaction with someone who doesn't like directly report to me. And it's like, oh, you're awesome. Like I could learn so much from you. It's just funny, like when you mix it up a little bit, how you can actually build like stronger bonds and a stronger team. So
at Mulhall's, a part of so we called it NEO, which is new employee onboarding.
Do you name these? Is that you?
So NEO, I actually stole from WP Engine.
Oh, you did?
Okay. But I loved it because I'd been calling it New Hire Week, quote unquote, for like 4 years. And NEO just was like so much quicker. And it kind of took on a life of its own. Like, a lot of people had like images of the Matrix, Neo and stuff but no, I brought Neo to Mulhall. So at least some folks there probably thought that I made that up. I'm not trying to take all the credit. I'm really not trying to take the credit.
That's funny.
But yeah, so I got to introduce Neo at Mulhall's, and one of the things that I included as part of that program. So at Flywheel, it was 4 full days. At Mulhall's for full-time year-round team members, it was 2 full days. So just a little bit of a different program. But one of the things I always included was having people do like a 3-hour shadow in a business unit that they're not going to be part of long term.
Oh, interesting.
And the reason is, and it's kind of to that idea of like these collisions, is people have the best of intentions when they started a job. Like, I'm going to get to know everybody.
Right.
One day down the road, like, I'm totally going to sit with you and I'm going to take sales calls with you. Or I'm going to sit with you and I'm going to learn how you, run Neo. Or maybe I learn how you run the social media or something like that. Yeah. But I'm like, let's say I'm an accountant. Do you really think like 6 months into your job that you're going to even take 2 hours out?
Oh, yeah.
No, you're too busy.
Not at all. Yeah.
Because you like the emails start piling up and the tasks and to-do lists and the deadlines. And so it's so difficult to make time to see other parts of the business. Anyway, I just so believe in those collisions like you talked about, linking people together but do it early on in people's times at your company, because you will find every reason and excuse to not do it as they get deeper
as soon as the work starts going.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've started to do that here at Fruitful. It's probably because you suggested it. Now and then thinking, I'm like, I know that I had a couple conversations with Brett. Was that one of the things she told us to do? Because in the last like year and a half or so, when we onboard someone, like they go and they get to experience every part of the company, and it's really fascinating. Awesome. It was really fun for, I've already mentioned her once, but Angela, our administrative assistant, she's not someone who's actually in production, right? She's not a designer. She's not a strategist or whatever. It was so fun for her to learn what everybody does. And then she better knows, like, even just for her own work, she better knows like who does what and what it is we do, so that she can talk more expertly with people who inquire, et cetera. And like, the education piece is just really good for everybody. And I love to be one of the people implementing it, like actually like teaching, because I get to relearn things about my company every time. It's like, oh yeah, that did happen. Like I teach like the history of our company and some of the design stuff. And it's just always, it's good for everyone to be reminded. And it's good for some people, it's easy for I think employers sometimes just assume everyone gets it. They do not get it. Like people need to be reminded. Think of how often we need to be reminded of what we do.
Yes.
Your customers do, but so do your employees. There's a lot of overlap there, which actually kind of takes me to something I wanted to talk about. So here at Fruitful, we're always harping on the Storybrand framework, right? That puts the customer as the hero, right? So when we're thinking of an employer or employment brand, obviously the employee or the potential employee, they're kind of the hero of the story. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, being in this world for a while, like what kind of things did you do to kind of put yourself in the mindset of an employee or a potential employee?
Great question. I think that's part of like why I so love being on the people team, is putting myself in the shoes of that hero, if you will, putting myself in the shoes of someone who doesn't know what it's like to work here. So from day one, with every NEO that I ever ran, which I've been running onboardings at 3 different companies for almost 10 years. So I've onboarded a lot of people.
Do you know how many people? Like,
I could guess.
Could you
I
guess?
could probably
What would
guess.
be, like,
it's probably
30?
Oh gosh, Ben!
I have not got anywhere near there.
It's literally probably closer to like 500.
Wow! Congratulations.
Yes,
see, I told you she was an expert.
It's so much fun for me though to get to be that person's like first impression of the company. And I always told, like when I was training trainers to be on my team, I would always say like, you have to work really hard to remember what it feels like to not know. Because when you do know, like even something so simple, like if you're working in an office, something so simple as where are the bathrooms? Like people can feel such anxiety on their first day going, I need to go to the bathroom, but I literally don't know where to go. And it can be so debilitating getting up from training and being like, looking around the room, like trying to figure out, like, and is there a sign?
You puts them in an awkward spot of like, they have to be the person to ask because they have to go to the bathroom. At this point, they're like dancing. I just want to say real quick, Raj, my co-host, who's not present, he's always so good about when we have clients in the office. He always like shows them where the bathrooms are, and I always forget about that kind of stuff. I'm like, let's just get into the meeting, But he's always like, "Would you like a drink?" And the bathrooms are right down the hall and to the left, and like huge. Walks them right to the door. And so sometimes they're like, I'm gonna go right now, It's just like, and that's not for an employee, but like how much more important it is for an employee too.
Oh my goodness, exactly. So I would always like first thing start with like, here's the things that seem like if you were a long-term employee, you might look at that like PowerPoint slide that of all the things I have listed that you'd be like, wow, that's so simple. Like it's so basic. Why are you even telling them? But I would remember what it feels like to not know that information. So it's literally like, hey, we expect you to be here at 9 a.m. and otherwise, like during NEO, but otherwise, like we're like a really flexible in and out kind of company. But, I don't want you to accidentally show up or, show up 10 minutes late and be like, oh, I thought you guys were a flexible company. Like, no, I'm trying to set the precedent early that like this week is the one week that we're going to be strict about that timing, just like really calling it out, because so many things, even just like cultural norms, people learn through osmosis over time because they're just like experiencing and getting exposed to it among their coworkers. But like, I'm much more in the camp of like, let's just be deliberate and talk about this first and foremost and right away, so that it takes the guesswork out of it. Like, if I do want to leave for a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day, like, how do I handle that? Is that allowed? Just those types of norms. Like, if I do take off, do I need to send a message like in Slack? Do I need to post to the whole team, or can I just tell my boss? Like,
just stand up in the middle of the room and announce with a megaphone, I am going to a doctor's appointment.
Totally.
These are the kind of things that like we've struggled with defining sometimes. Like, we were a really, really small team for a long time, and then we started to grow in the last year. And it's like, some of us just kind of know how things are, right? It's not clear to everyone else though, and it's like, it's really easy to say like, no, we're fun, we're flexible, whatever. But then there's sometimes like, okay, well, we're not that flexible. Like we still got to get work done. So finding that balance can be hard. And how do you, I see with you just seem like really gifted at being able to anticipate those things. And that can be hard at times. Sometimes we found ourselves, we're not realizing these potential problems until they are problems. And so how do you anticipate that? How do you it sounds to me like you just come in and like, oh yes, this might be a problem 10 years from now with this person. So we're going to create a policy, or we're going to communicate this, but I'm sure it's not like that. How do you just, are you just a worst case scenario person? You just always, you're like an Enneagram 6 and you're just always expecting everything to go wrong. And so when it does, you're like, yes, we planned for this. Or like,
actually, I'm an Enneagram 3, so it's like a drive to like
threes.
Figure it out.
Get it done.
Yes.
Let's get it done.
No, but I think you're right, Ben. You can't anticipate all of it. And it's not even to say that like, oh, it's just my personality that I'm able to do that. I genuinely think that it's a lot of times it's failing and it's learning from a past mistake. I was actually just talking with a friend who works for a company that's right about the size of Fruitful. And she was like, we are such a flexible company. And so we don't have any sort of policy in place for, she was referring to it as moonlighting, but basically, like side hustles. Mm-hmm. Like, are people allowed to freelance on the side? Right. Or, when and if that becomes an issue with their day job, like their full-time gig, like how do we address this? And I was able to share with her, like, look, I have been through this with a company and it went really poorly to the point, like basically what happened where there were two people who were working on their side hustle during office hours in the office. And it kind of was, it was such an awkward situation where we're like, we know they're doing this. We don't know how to talk about it. And so we just, the person's boss like came in and was just like, don't do that anymore. And there was no like kind of strategy behind it. And there was no like compassion of like, right. Like, oh, am I getting like written up for this or something? And it kind of ultimately ended up being sort of the beginning of the end for those folks. And they ended up leaving, pursuing their side hustle.
I've heard of these kind of stories happen all the time. And if you don't address it or like have like a plan in place, like it will happen, especially if you're with creative people. You cannot contain people's creativity. So by default, they will moonlight. Like Fruitful exists because I was moonlighting Fruitful at my other job. But to my old boss's credit, Donovan Beery at 1119, like he told me right from the start, he was like, hey, this is totally cool by me.
That's awesome.
Now I didn't do it in the office during work hours. It was nights and weekends.
Yeah.
But he was always very supportive, and I publicly posted the stuff I was working on. But it was okay with him. Other places it's not okay, and you just have to, But it's better to like to know that stuff. Yeah,
and like having gone through that situation where it wasn't a success story. I think I was able to talk to my friend going through it today and say like, this is how I would handle it differently. And so that's kind of me like anticipating things today. I probably wouldn't think of half of those things in year one of my career, but I just, experience comes wisdom. And like I think 9 times out of 10, like I always joke that like human resources, HR, it's like 90% just good judgment. Like a lot of people go for like their certifications and like their senior professional of HR. Like there's all these like, it's big business getting these like certifications and taking classes and things like that. And those are important, especially for like kind of the compliance side of HR. But when it comes to like employee relations and like conflict management and even like training and development, onboarding people, like it's just 90% of the time it's just good judgment. It's like, well, y'all, we've never seen this before. Like, let's get into the war room and talk about it. Like, I remember a new hire. She was brand new. This is week 1, week 2, something like that. And she comes to me and she shares like that she's pregnant and she's due in a month. And it was just, I don't want to like get into the details of like, I literally didn't even physically notice.
Oh, wow.
And so it was kind of shocking. Like I was taken aback by the news just because I hadn't heard yet that she was pregnant. And so I went to that individual's manager and I said, did you know that so-and-so is pregnant? And she's like, no, I had no idea. And I was thinking like, like what do you do in that situation? Because we were an employer that we prided ourselves on like taking care of our people. Yeah. And we had a very generous maternity leave. But we had never been confronted with the situation of like, I've worked here for 4 weeks and now I'm going to be gone for 12 or whatever. And so we were just like, how do we navigate this, you know? And it's things like that, like you can't really put in a textbook. Like you just kind of have to experience it and figure it out.
Okay, so everyone wants to know what happened. What did you do? You just fired her, or what did you do?
No, God forbid, no. No, my gosh, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, Ben.
I know. It's like, golly.
No, we kind of just like grandfathered her into the program. Kind of, as on paper, it was like you had to be there for 12 months to get the 12 weeks off. But we just kind of grandfathered her into it and just said,
You're
like,
so nice.
No, it wasn't
so
nice.
nice.
I mean, truly, like that was like covering our ass. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like, no, that was probably really just like a liability thing. No, but I actually think we ended up giving her. We kind of went through like a short-term disability versus.
Okay.
So it was more kind of like an insurance thing. And yeah, there's probably a lot more kind of nitty gritty, boring stuff behind the scenes on that. But it definitely was like we had to talk to our lawyers and stuff, you know,
Wow.
like we've never confronted, this has never come up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say that, yeah, that's a lot of my knowledge today is just having experienced it in one way or another through various companies and scenarios. So yeah.
That's awesome. So, Brett, why is an employment brand valuable to an organization?
Well, do you want to hire good people?
There's the clip. That's the clip.
I love it. No, it's so important. So I remember when I was a student, you know, getting ready to graduate, I had this really strong desire. And granted, you know, this is 10 years ago, well before I was even kind of aware of like the kind of startup scene or the tech world that had like kind of all these cool, unique perks and things like that are like really drawing people in today. But at the time, I had this strong desire to like work for a big name company. Like if I'm living in Omaha, I was thinking of like the ConAgras or TD Ameritrade or Gallup or something like that. And so that's where I was like putting my resume in. But I was not hearing back from anybody. And
interesting.
It was just at the time something where I was thinking, like, why can't I get noticed? I ended up working for this staffing agency instead. And at the time when I got hired, I thought, well, this doesn't seem as glamorous because it's not this big name, you know, but after years of working with them, realizing like, no, this is like, I was able to get my foot in the door here and I was able to make a name for myself and like succeed quickly here because I wasn't like just a number, you know. If I worked for one of those Fortune 500 companies, you have tens of thousands of employees. And then I went to a company that had more like 500 employees. And so I was able to really like kind of level up really quickly because I didn't get lost. Like I wasn't just like a little fish in a big pond. Like I was a big fish in a little pond.
That's what you want.
Yeah, that's what you want.
Listeners, that's what you want.
Yeah.
Big fish, little pond. Just remember that.
Exactly. And so I started like realizing that name brand didn't mean as much to me as an employee as like employer brand. And so in this era of work in 2022, like the workplace, like the workforce, 9 times out of 10, unless you were like crazy specialty in your area of like your niche, you have tons of options of where to work. And so it does matter. Like, what is it going to feel like to work there? How are they going to treat me? Like, is this a nurturing environment or is this competitive in a way that like is unhealthy, you know? So I think that an employer brand in this day and age is so critical to people's success because are you going to draw in the right talent and are you going to retain that talent, you know? So some of that is what comes to mind, but I don't know if that fully answers your question.
No, I think that's awesome. Yeah. Some of you listening or watching may feel a little overwhelmed. You need to basically hire someone like Brett, who obviously they're very hard to find. They're very, very important, busy people, maybe very expensive. Who knows? They have to be able to anticipate all these problems, et cetera. And it may seem like this daunting thing to like have a employment brand. But what are some like just easy, smaller things that, any company could do to kind of work towards having a brand that, is really appealing and is really able to attract and retain their employees?
I think about the keys to retention are like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
I told you she's so smart. Okay. Yes. Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, of course.
Pyramid.
But for the listeners, can you just, explain it?
Yeah, that's a great, let's see if I can explain it. So basically, whoever Maslow is, some smart philosophical guy at some point in history, he developed this hierarchy of needs, which is basically like, it starts at a base level of like having your physiological needs met. And then you like move up to like your safety needs, and then move up to like feelings of belonging. And then you move all the way up the top of the pyramid is like self-actualization. And it's this idea that if you don't have your foundational physiological needs met, then like you can't possibly think about like love and belonging because like you haven't eaten in a week.
Yes.
And so like it's so important to start from the foundation and move up the pyramid. And I think about that in terms of retaining talent too. So, a lot of companies are, especially in this time, in this era of work, they're thinking first and foremost about like mission, vision,
right,
and like purpose. Like, I want to attract people who are passionate about, like at Mulhall's, it was beautifying the community. I want to, I want to attract people who care a ton about sustainability and the climate and that type of thing. And we were able to find folks who were passionate about those things. But a lot of times we would step back and say like, but do we have like the physiological piece down? So for instance, like, do people like know what's expected of them at work? They have job descriptions. If you don't even know what's expected of you, how can we expect you to like have at the top of the pyramid, like have a best friend at work? Like, we cared about all those things,
right,
but if you don't have like the tools and equipment to do your job well, then like, how can we expect you to be passionate about our purpose when you can't even do your day job? So
that's interesting. It's like there's a certain order you need to go.
I think so.
Instead of starting, there at the top, it's like, hey, let's make sure we've got this. And then you kind of graduate.
Exactly. I mean, like the dogs in the office or ping pong tables or lunch provided every day.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to say just get a ping pong table, get some beer on tap, everyone gets a cool shirt.
Right.
Those were the three things, but never mind. I guess it's a lot deeper than that.
Hurt. Right? They certainly, those are valuable things, don't get me wrong, but I think that you'll see that they make a bigger difference to the folks who are like really cemented in like what it is they are expected to do, have the tools to do their job well. And then, like the pizza parties and things like that are towards the top of the pyramid where it's like,
it's interesting. Take
it or leave it. I'm not going to stay at a job that I don't know what's expected of me and I feel like I can't win the day.
Yeah.
So if your people don't feel like they can be successful because they don't have those foundational things. Like my husband always says, he's in finance, but he's always just like, I just want to get people paid, because that is like literally like the first and the foundational thing that everybody wants out of their job. I mean, I don't care who you are. The company, like it's not a charity. Like you don't work for free. Yep. And so pay is part of that physiological, that foundational piece of the pyramid. And so make sure that you have those foundational important pieces of the puzzle established. And that might be like an employee handbook that outlines things that are clear cut. But then you can move on to more of those fun things.
That's super good. I think, for me, I'm a, business owner of a mission-driven organization, and I like working with other mission-driven organizations and stuff. And I think there can be this feeling of like, I just need to get everyone excited about this mission and get on board and just put it in more places and whatnot. Yeah. But like, if they don't know how to do their job, what's expected of them.
Yeah.
If they're not able to, what would you say, win the day, or like,
win the day.
be able to win the day. Like, they're not going to really care about that mission. It's like, what about their mission right now? Like,
Yes.
and maybe if that is really clear, they can tap into that bigger one. But I think there's sometimes, even guys like me, we can get that. It's like, why don't they get it? Why don't they get it? And it's like, well, do they know what is expected of them right now?
Yes.
And that can feel like, because I know what that feels like to both to know exactly what's expected of me and be able to crush a day and just feel like that was very satisfying.
Yes.
I could stay here forever. And then I also know what it's like to feel like, what am I doing here?
Yes,
like, what, I don't know. I have a hard time shutting work off because I don't know, like, when it's done, like, what's expected. And so, a lot has changed in the world in the last few years. Mm-hmm. And I imagine, the industry that you're from has also changed too, with, COVID-19 lockdowns, people working remotely. Just, I feel like, we've posted a few jobs in the last couple years, and it's like everyone expects this to be a fully remote position, potentially. So there's just been a lot of changes. Like, what are some changes you've seen, and for the good or for bad? Yeah.
So I don't have a silver bullet answer, and I don't know how to like make things easier for companies that might be challenged by this new reality. But one of the first things that comes to my mind is just the idea that remote work is a privilege, and not every employee gets that luxury, of that flexibility and the option to work from home. I worked at Mulhall's. A lot of blue collar workers always joked that like you can't landscape someone's yard from behind a desk at your house.
They have like robots that you can do or something remotely.
Yeah, maybe one day. But in the meantime, really, really grateful for those workers who just grind it out every single day, and they don't ask for the option to work from home. And for them, I appreciate that work ethic and tenacity. But secondly, I will say I worked remotely for about 9 months during 2020 when COVID hit. Wow. And I personally, just in terms of like my skill set and what I love doing, I did not find a lot of fulfillment doing it from home. I think that like I'm best utilized in an office space where I can be face to face with people and kind of, nurture relationships that way. Not to say it's not possible remotely.
Sure.
But my other thought is just that, the pendulum is always swinging. And like there was a time, even at my first company out of college at the staffing agency, it was like we didn't even have casual Fridays. Like I wore business casual 5 days a week. There was no such thing as flex time or anything like that. Like I didn't even have email on my phone. I didn't have a laptop. Like I came to work. I sat at a desktop computer 8 to 9 hours a day, and then I went home. Like that, like the days of that are over, I feel. Oh, yeah. And I'm grateful for that, right? No, that's one, so like the pendulum swung that way, but now the pendulum is swinging to the far extreme of the other side where everyone is demanding that things have to be remote friendly or even remote first. And they're, demanding things like I need a home office stipend, and if you were going to pay for my food in the office, or you do so with your in-office employees, like you better pay for my lunches at home or things like that.
I don't want my remote employees to
getting
hear
ideas.
Getting ideas.
Right.
All right, Brett.
I'm not suggesting those are good ideas at all. It's just how the pendulum has swung, and I do think, as with all things, like the dust will settle, and like things will come back to center as they almost always do. And so, I think for companies who are struggling with like, I want an in-office culture, but I don't have team members who want that back. Maybe it's time to invest in retreats and like flying people in for those quarterly meetups and things like that, so that you can start to build that face-to-face those face-to-face dynamics that you're not getting day to day.
Yeah.
And maybe you're in an office, you're sitting in an office and you wish that you were remote, and maybe you can start to bring up the idea of hybrid work and find a happy medium. But like I said, I don't have a perfect answer for this. I know it's challenging, and I would say that, like, we've talked about this already, but this is like, we talk about the housing market as being like a buyer's market or a seller's market. Like right now, this is a worker's market. Like they have options. They do not have to stay working for you. They can work anywhere they want. They can, in fact, I recently heard a story of coworkers banding together and trying to fight for a 4-day work week. And when their CEO said, we're not going to do a 4-day work week, that doesn't work with our business model, then they were posting in Slack a LinkedIn feed of all the 32-hour a week jobs that they found. And it's like, well, what do we do with that? Like, this is a workers market.
That is so different than the world that, a lot of us graduated, into the 2008 recession and stuff. Yeah. And, Raj tells stories about how hard, that was for him. And it was just a different world where there was not enough jobs to go around and everything. And like, what a different experience we have now, which is great. But of course, employers like me are a little scared because that's one of those things. I see these 4-day work weeks. And there's times where I'm like, man, maybe we could do that. We get most of our best work done between Monday and Thursday anyways. Right. I pretty much just did a podcast on Friday. Yeah. We're like Friday after work hours here. Kind of defying that, I guess.
I would just say, like, a word of encouragement is, like, I think most kind of sources or studies would say that onboarding a new team member is quite expensive because those initial costs are really pricey, whether it's, paying the recruiter to get them in the door, but then also just like all the tools and equipment it takes to train them and get them settled. But they end up, like, you get like a return on that investment within about 6 months to a year. And so I would just encourage companies to think about, like, if you can get 3 good years out of an employee, then that's actually 3 powerful years. And it's okay if they were to leave at that point, because the speed at which business is moving, the pace of business in 2022 is like, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying that what got us here won't get us there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so this idea that, like, we thank you for your 3 years of service or whatever it may be around that. But, like, you got us here. It's okay if you leave because we're going to find somebody else to get us there. And so just being, gracious and not being, overly concerned or fearful of
clingy or
clingy is a good word.
Go.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I've heard some business leaders say. Like, if they can get those few years out of folks, like, they're happy. And so I would just encourage business leaders to be thinking in that way and try not to be overly clingy. Or my old boss at Mulhall's, he would always refer to it as talent hoarding. Like, we do not want to be a talent hoarder. Yeah. So this idea that, like, we actually know that, Ben, like, you're in this kind of entry level role, and we don't have any room for you to move up. And we know that, like, you would kill it over here. Yeah. Or, like, actually, it's more so to say, like, we know that you would love to work over here, but, like, you're killing it over here and we just can't afford to lose you. And so we're going to say things like, maybe in a year or something like that, but we just keep putting off giving you the opportunity to advance or grow and develop in your career because we're hoarding your talent over here. Like, don't do that. Let people go because they're going to go anyway,
Yeah. That's just so interesting, that suggestion for employers to kind of, like, maybe change adjust their idea of what retaining looks like. Yeah. Like, I think of, at our company, Erin just celebrated 7 years as an employee here. And it's like, we're giving her a sabbatical and, like, all this stuff. And just so thankful for that time. And I don't take it lightly. That's 7 years, a long time. Yes. I can't believe I've made it longer than that. Yes. And then, Nick, our good friend and designer for a number of years, I think he almost made 3 years full time. He moved on to another job. He actually still offices with us because the company works for offices remotely here at our office. So we haven't really got rid of him. But like, I remember how nervous he was to tell me that he was considering this other job and he thought he was going to lose a friend and all this. And like in that moment, when I heard how excited he was about the opportunity that he had at other places, like, who am I to hoard your talent, to borrow your phrase? Like, no way. Like, this is so amazing. First of all, I knew we had gotten so much out of him. Like it felt like, it was just such an amazing amount of work. And I knew that we would still be friends and all that, that silliness.
That's not silly.
It can be hard though. It can be hard though. I mean, we've had that a few times now, people leaving, and it can be just so hard when it's like, you see that talent going out the door, what could be. And especially when you're small, I think sometimes in a bigger company,
right?
It's like, people kind of come and go and maybe you get used to that cadence, but like there's, I think, an expectation when you're a smaller, 10 or fewer, maybe 15 or fewer, it's like, no, we're family. We can refer to ourselves as family.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be a little unhealthy when it's like, no,
you're
not family. You're paying them. And I need to change that. I think it still says family on our website somewhere. Sorry. That will be redacted.
People do love to say that. We used to say that at Flywheel. But like I recently listened to another podcast that was talking about factory workers and they were that demographic was like, don't call us family. Like, I don't do this with family. I do this for family. And so I work here for my family. Like, y'all are not my family. And I think again, that's kind of that's a two ends of an extreme. And somewhere in the middle is probably a healthier place for your culture, is being really like having nurturing relationships in the workplace and having safe spaces for people, but also like recognizing that like they might not want to do happy hour every week with the team because if we're stopping work, like I kind of want to go home, and that's fine. That's okay too, So it is really tough, especially as the business owner, because you're like, well, this is my life. So is it not yours?
That's so interesting. Like I felt, both sides of that where, with full disclosure, Fruitful, we have about half fully remote employees and half here in our beautiful ex-Flywheel office in downtown Omaha. And I'm here at the office in Omaha, and we have our amazing remote workers kind of all over the globe. We've got a guy in Istanbul, Turkey. We've got someone in Washington, D.C., someone in Arizona, and someone in Washington State. And I always feel so bad that they don't get to be a part of what we're doing here and having our team lunches and all. They don't get the exact same experiences they would if they were here. One of the team members was like, hey, we're trying to get a happy hour together. All of us hang out, after work. And it's been hard to schedule just because like a lot of us we want to go home. I've got like 100 kids at home. And like, and I love them and I want to see them. And so it's an interesting thing. Not everyone has the same expectations, and trying to, as an employer, just being open to, one person's idea of what, is satisfying in their work may be different, even where they are, how they're working. For myself, when it comes to like, remote work, other than the fact that I've been able to work with people, all around the country and stuff, there's some perks to that. I like the ability of being able to work from home. Like I've got a great work from home setup. Thank you, COVID.
Yes.
And so like I have the privilege of if a kid is sick or if Meg needs to run to the store or whatever, like I can work from home. I have that ability, is awesome.
Right.
But Brett, I want you to say something controversial. Like, isn't there something special about being in the office?
Oh,
like,
yes.
Okay, so like, I'm not trying to get you to like knock remote work at all, because we are pro remote work and hybrid work. But like, isn't there something special or something that we're losing not being in an office together?
100%. I think that's why, at least in my experience, that's why COVID and working from home like stung so much, is because I was very attached to my in-office experience and seeing my people and yeah, I remember being so down in the dumps that I couldn't come to the office anymore. And so, yeah, I'm team office all the way. I think that companies are at a competitive advantage when they have their team in office every day, because you like the ideating, and I know that's probably just a buzzword, and I don't mean to be cliche, but just like that ideation that happens. Like, for instance, I remember just being able to just roll a chair over to someone's desk and be like, can I pick your brain about this? Like, this is something I'm struggling with. I'm just so much more inclined to roll the chair over versus like send a Slack. Hey, do you have 5 minutes? I know I'm interrupting you. And let's start a Zoom call. And you know it's never just going to be 5 minutes. And so they're like, well, I really have to stop what I'm doing if I'm going to
and you can't read their body language as they react to all that.
Totally.
By the time they get on the Zoom, maybe they've dealt with whatever, you know, if they were like rolling their eyes or
100%.
being bothered or like brushing their teeth. You just don't know. Whereas like there's something to be said for here in the office. Like I can just kind of like visually see how are we all doing before I interrupt you or before I take your side. Whereas like, it's not that it can't work, but you know, we did fly everyone in for the first time. We did Top Golf. We did a big like team meeting and like, it was so special. I mean, you know, if we could afford to do that every quarter, that would be so awesome.
Yes.
And so, yeah, maybe that's our next step. We just need to make sure that happens at least twice a year.
Pull back in other areas so you can really splurge. And I can just hear it now, like naysayers listening to this call or listening to this podcast and being like, I am the most efficient and effective employee I've ever been working remotely. And like, I don't like argue with that. I think that there are tons of folks, especially who are more kind of individual contributors who just really love like that focus space. I'm sure there's tons of people who truly are their best worker from home.
Well, you're all about, you know, people, of course, being head of people, but you're also all about, I feel like, experience, and experiences are very hard to, you know, control is a bad word because control sounds a little bit manipulative or controlling. But it's hard to, you know, curate experiences when you're doing it remotely and you're dependent on the quality of the Zoom camera and the internet or whatever. It's like, we all know we all endured 2020.
You can only play so many Jackbox games before you lose your mind.
We did that a couple times. Oh man, and exactly. And so, yeah, definitely pros and cons. I think I am one of the people that there are times when I do just need to work from home and to get that focus, like in that zone. Because I'm such a social person. I'm such a talkative person. I could spend all day just smiling and bopping from, you know, desk to desk. And I don't like sometimes being at my desk that's in the midst of all of the other designers and other team members' desks. It can be really hard for me to just focus and get into that like, you know, Zen state that I need to be in to do my best design work. Definitely. But and so I do get that, and having the ability to do that, or to go to a couch over here, to go to a coffee shop, like having that flexibility, having things like laptops. I'm glad that you call it a privilege. Like it really is a privilege that we have in this day and age.
I think so too.
Just that, like, you know, not only do we have this technology, but it's just so dang transportable, and we have this thing called the internet. It was like, you know, there's a lot of talk about privilege these days, but like just thinking about the kinds of the work privilege that many of us enjoy. And I think a lot of our listeners probably fall into this demographic. Like we have the ability to do this stuff, and that's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that we were able to, you know, weather, you know, 2020, 2021. But, you know, I would challenge, I wouldn't go so far as to say like, you know, stop offering remote jobs and stuff like that. I think you're right. It's here to stay. But I think like, let's not diminish just the power and like the magic of being in the same room, you know, with each other. Cause I heard several of the out of town, you know, folks from our team when we were all together just talking about it and be like, oh, that was so special. Oh, that was so cool. Oh, so-and-so is so much cooler in real life, kind of a thing where it's like, oh man, I didn't know so-and-so was that tall or that short. Or like, you know, like you just like, you feel like you connect in a way that 100%. You can't replicate, you know, virtually. And I was just reading this book called Culture Code by, is it Daniel Coyle?
Okay.
And one of the things that he found is the difference between really, really just productive and efficient teams and those that aren't as productive and efficient was how close their desks were together.
Oh,
I think that was maybe
wow.
Google or something that had done a bunch of research on that. But like literally the further apart people just physically were, the less they were able to like collaborate and synergize and really combine their talents and the collisions and all that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
And so, think about, not only furthering them apart, but literally putting them on other sides of the world, different time zones, et cetera.
Yes, absolutely.
There's something does, break down. And I hopefully we don't get canceled for this.
Yeah,
So.
I know. I do feel like I'm kind of like
clickbait in here.
I feel like we're in the minority like right now in 2022. And like this is coming from somebody who, I'm at home now with my kid. And so
you're always working from home.
I'm always working from home now. So it's so funny.
Full disclosure.
But yeah, I did want to share that like as I think about like because I think working remotely fully is like a very progressive thing. And obviously some companies have allowed and have had fully remote employees for probably decades or something.
Yeah.
But it's just now like so hip.
Expected.
Expected. You're right.
That's the difference, I think. Like my dad has been doing like a hybrid, like part remote, really. Part remote work. He works for Veterans Affairs in Lincoln.
Okay.
And he used to drive from Omaha to Lincoln every single day.
Wow, yes.
To and from. And he kind of convinced him, like, dude, I could do maybe 2 days in Lincoln and like I could do the other 3 at home. And so he'd been doing that for years. And then it went to fully from home. But he was all set up. It was all ready to go.
Right, that's great.
So like for some people, it has been a thing.
And my dad's been working from home since he's off and on since I was like 10. So
crazy.
Yeah. So it has been.
That's so cool.
So cool.
Before it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, like, if you can bring some of those, progressive experiences, like I think remote work is semi-progressive, to bring that into the office. Like, for instance, I got to bring my baby to work for several months after I left, or like when I came back from maternity leave.
How did that go? I'm so curious. Like, did that I see people like posting like, pro bring babies to work and having this kind of, which I very, very pro baby, very pro mother. And like, obviously Brett knows she could work here with her baby. Like, I want to make sure that's, recorded. But like, how did it work for you?
Yeah.
Like, was it challenging?
I was like, it worked out so much better than I ever envisioned in my head.
Wow.
I thought that I was just gonna be kind of like this guinea pig to this like very avant-garde like experience. But it ended up being such a success and truly like, talk about like a retention builder. Like it was like, wow. I think everyone looking on at this program that we built at Mulhall's was like, we're putting our money where our mouth is. Like, we're actually doing this. And so anyway, I was just going to say that I remember my boss, our CEO, he was like, I was certain that I was going to have to tell everybody, like, stop being a jerk. Like, I know that there are crying babies in the office, but like just be nice and like go back to work. But he's like, it was the exact opposite. It was actually, guys, like, start working. Like, I know the babies are cute. Yes. Everybody.
So did other people bring their babies too?
Yes. So we had 3 mothers give birth within 6 weeks.
Oh, man.
And we all brought our babies to work. And it was, it is literally one of like the most memorable and delightful experiences of my life. Like it was a privilege, I felt so lucky to get to do it. And people were just so generous, so kind. Like I was nursing at the time. So it's like, hey, you know what? I just need to step away. Like, we're in this meeting. Can we delay it by like 10 minutes?
Sure.
I'm going to the wellness room or whatever. Or, I would just, it was so funny. Like, we would have insurance brokers, like, being head of people, I was in charge of things like that. So we'd have insurance brokers come in and I'm in there. Like, I literally had like a pad on the table with like a baby laying there while we like,
dude,
while we
love
just
it.
had this meeting.
I feel like you should have brought your baby Cannon. You should have brought him here. Like,
well, he's
how
almost
cool
11 months now.
Oh yeah, that's true. He's a little big.
So he would have been like pulling like all of this, and all of this beautiful equipment would be destroyed.
Oh yeah, that's why none of one of my hundreds of kids are not here.
Yeah,
they'd be destroying this place.
Yes.
There's so much more we could talk about, but we here on Growing a Fruitful Brand, we like to end with kind of an action step. So if there was one thing that that you could encourage brands to do to take a step towards making a more healthy or a better employment brand, what would you recommend?
If I were to say something that I haven't already said, something that comes to mind is to, when you think about your brand and your employer brand, like, be realistic and don't be aspirational. I think that people like kind of have like their BS radar on as applicants, and they can tell when things are just box checking on a website, like the dogs in the office, the beer fridge, things like that.
Yeah.
And so, as you're writing core values, as you're thinking about like, who are we and what do we stand for? Like, try not to be aspirational. Try to think about like, who are we actually? And so I think as a good first step for companies is to just really take stock, like talk to your customers if you have any. Maybe you're brand new. Talk to your employees if you have any, and involve them in the process of like talking about who are we as an employer. And I think that is going to put you on paper like as a like more authentic than just trying to say like, oh, we are so flexible, you can do anything you want here. And then somebody starts and then they realize, oh, I can't do anything I want here. Like there's actually rules and kind of guidelines and stuff. So I would encourage companies to just take stock of like, who are you actually today, and run with the best parts of that. And that will shine through as, why someone would want to come work for you, and highlight the best parts of who you are as an employer.
Brett Hicks, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ben. This is awesome.
Thanks for joining us today on Growing a Fruitful Brand. If you found today's show helpful, don't forget to subscribe and consider sharing it with someone who might also enjoy it. If you'd like to work with Fruitful on a branding, website, or messaging project of your own, you can always reach out on our website, fruitful.design. So until next time, don't forget to grow something good.